Hey, welcome back to Score on Business. And last week we had Judd Larson and Ed Moody from Restorify Restoration, and they have so much to share. We are having you all back. Thank you for being here today.
I appreciate us back.
Yeah, so Ed and Judd, Judd Larson, Ed Moody are both CFO level finance professionals with day jobs and an interest in being entrepreneurs. They saw an opportunity for their skill set to drive and maximize value for customers within the restoration services industry. So tell us a little bit about Restorify and what you do.
So Restorify, what we do is actually in our name. So we restore people's homes and businesses back to pre-existing conditions after they've been impacted by any kind of unfortunate circumstance, such as flood, fire, storm damage, wind. We're the people to go to. And so, our whole goal is that we want to be the first call that any home or business owner makes, and we want to put your life back together.
And you all just got a great designation.
We did, and in fact, we work with a service providing network called Code Blue. And so Code Blue, we've been working with them for the last several months, and they were able to give us a designation of elite status here in Nashville. There's only a couple other providers besides us that have that status with them. And so, we've been able to come in and prove ourselves very quickly in this market to show the viability that we have, and that's evident based on that status. So we're very fortunate to have that, and we think it also represents what we share and what we provide to our customers.
Yes. And Code Blue's probably not a household name for everybody. What they do, the big insurance companies we've all heard of, many of them have Code Blue take care of the restoration part, or have them not do it. But
yeah, so Code Blue is an administrator. So if you think of, they are basically representing the administrative process to file claims for a lot of small insurance companies. So you think of State Farm, obviously they're large enough, they're going to have their own administration network. Well, Code Blue allows a lot of small insurance companies to aggregate within Code Blue, and Code Blue will then handle the administration for them. So
that makes perfect sense. So the point being that it's a big deal to get that.
Oh yeah, absolutely, it's a big deal.
So what are a few things you would tell a prospective entrepreneur to be aware of?
So there's really 2 points that I'd like to make. The first one is kind of, don't be afraid to change your course. And so often, everybody continues to throw, whether it's time and resources or money, at a product or service that just might not be taking off. And so often, in finance, you hear the word sunk cost. I think one of the biggest things is don't be afraid to change the course based on what the market is telling you to do, and stop necessarily spending time or energy towards something that's not effective.
Right. Effective, that's saying throwing good money after bad.
Absolutely. And so you can either cut your loss or you can continue to go down a road, and it's best to just cut your loss and actually start adapting to what the market is telling you to do. So that's going to be the first piece of advice that I would say. And then secondly, I would say elicit feedback and do it often, whether it's from friends and family or it's customers. So often it's hard to look internally at times and kind of really understand. You get very tunnel vision when it comes to you're intimate with your product or service, you know it well, and sometimes being so intimate with it, you can't take a step back and really look at the bigger picture. So eliciting that feedback and listening to it and then actually putting it into practice is probably the second piece of advice that I would encourage any entrepreneur and or business owner to really do to make sure that they're being effective for their customers. Okay.
So is there anything you would add, Ed?
Well, to that end, I mean, obviously, in the prior show, I was making the point that you really need to understand, hey, in order for our product to be market ready, you need to understand what your threshold in time and money is to get that to get there. And in order for you to build your processes around kind of making sure that your product is market ready, before you make that first sale, the longer it takes for you to get to market, the more you're burning cash. So you need to make sure that you understand where your funding level is, how long it's going to take for you to get something that you deem to be market ready into the marketplace, and make sure that you've got at least that amount of money in funding and time. And a lot of times you want to make sure you have ample funding and time.
That is so critical. A lot of companies get started, and we call it the runway is not long enough, and the plane can't get off. That's an important point, is to really think through the money and things usually take longer than you hope.
Yeah.
Almost always.
Yeah. So most of what we'll talk about with you all today, you all are both high-level finance professionals, and I think understanding costs of a product or service is important, and I am not Mr. Numbers, and so it's a challenge that I face. What can you tell us about understanding what your product or service costs to deliver, and kind of how to determine it, how to work with it? We'll spend the rest of the show on this. Would you start us out?
Sure, absolutely.
And actually, let me ask the question differently,
Okay.
because it's like me asking the questions, kind of the blind leading the blind. Relative to cost and finance, what do entrepreneurs need to think about?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, and to your point with the other interview, you are afraid of spreadsheets. We love spreadsheets. You think about somebody playing the piano. That's how I feel when I'm creating a formula on Excel. So everybody's got their loves. But and just in case we run out of time, there's basically the framework is you want to build a business case to kind of understand build a scenario of different things that can happen overall. So first thing first, you need to define your product or your service. You need to figure out exactly where that product fits in within the marketplace. You need to understand what that cost structure looks like, which is your question, what the cost structure looks like in order for you to deliver that product into the marketplace. And then based on the infrastructure that's either needed, or if you decide to go an outsource route, what capacity does that infrastructure have the ability to deliver from a product or service perspective? And then once you understand your constraints, you build your business case around your research in the marketplace, what the market will bear, and then develop volume scenarios of what you think a best case scenario looks like, a worst case scenario looks like, what's your most likely view, and then really understand what your break even looks like. And then once you finish all of that, you'll understand where your product fits in the marketplace.
Right.
You'll understand what the market will bear from a pricing perspective. You'll understand your cost structure.
Right.
Your expected volumes, and then what's your margin scenario, or how much money you'll have based on different scenarios in the marketplace.
Okay, Judd, in about a minute or so, I recently heard of a company where it's a machine shop or something. There's guys working with their hands with mechanical parts. Somebody asked the guy what his costs were, and he said, "Oh, well, I don't keep up with it at that level, but we're making money." What is the problem with that?
Well, the problem with that is they're not factoring in all of the components that drive cost. So often in that you think I have the cost of the machine, I have the cost of the raw material, and I have the cost of the employee. You actually have more costs than that as a business. You have your overhead structure, so you have your facility cost, you have the original development costs that you're still trying to recoup in the margin of your product, you have your overhead, your leadership costs, so is there supervisors, managers, anything else that's going in there. So often I think the biggest problem is people understate the cost of their product. They look at only a few components instead of looking at everything, or even some of the allocated cost of that. So you almost have to take all of that into consideration. Otherwise, you're going to be doing yourself a disservice by thinking you're making more money than you really are. And that can lead into kind of the point where Ed was making before about your business case. If you're using incorrect assumptions in your business case, you're not giving yourself credit for the scenarios that will come. So your planning process becomes completely debunked at that point.
Okay. Hey, we are about out of time here.
No, that's great.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next week. Thanks.